Hey Trailblazers and Tarmac Tacklers.
Welcome back to the Maximum Mileage podcast. I'm Faye, resident mountain goat and running coach at Maximum Mileage.
And I'm Nick Hancock, the other one. Hello everybody, welcome back to the podcast. That was the shittest intro I've done so far.
It's because we overthought it.
We did,
there we go.
I thought let's try and mix it up today, but totally cocked that up. Anyway, how are you, Faye?
I'm all right, actually. Yes, I'm okay. I'm a little bit tired. It feels like it's been a long week, and I'm not going to say it because I'm not glad it's Friday again, but it's just, I'm glad that there's a bit of downtime ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, we get to do our long runs and all that lovely stuff on the weekends, don't we? So
exactly, and spend some time outside and away from screens, and so all is good.
Indeed.
What about you, Nick? How are you? How is the recovery going? I saw that you went out for a run.
I did, yes. So yes, I'm on the recovery trail back from hernia surgery. I did 4K on Wednesday, was it? And it was glorious. But I have to say yesterday. So yesterday being Thursday, at time of recording, I had really bad DOMs yesterday. Like my hip flexors, hamstrings, and glutes. I felt like a brand new runner again. I was like, oh my god, because I haven't run for 8 weeks. So it did feel a little bit odd and alien again, but good. Yeah, nice to be back having a little plod. I'm actually going to go for another one today. I might see if I can do 5K. Yeah, really nice and slow and easy. It was like 6.5 minute kilometer pace, which is fairly miserly for me.
It's also okay for slow runs to be that slow. I was thinking this only because I was thinking I did a foundation run yesterday, which looking back at was not foundation. It was probably a little bit too quick, but I was in a rush. And as a result, I ran too quickly, because then when I ran an easy run this morning, I was like, no, that's an easy run.
Yeah.
It's very, I caught myself out, but yeah, absolutely.
Good. Yeah, no, I'm going to have a little plodding in later. I've been on the bike a couple of times this week as well. So yeah, just gradually start. Actually, do you know what? From an aerobically fitness point of view, because I have continued to go on my bike on Zwift up until surgery. So, yeah, fitness-wise, I didn't feel too bad. It was literally just my, sort of glutes and hip flexors that were like, oh my God, I actually feel like I've just started running. It was that sort of fatigue in the muscles. But yeah, it was good. It was, nice to get back out. So what's your training look like this week?
This week has been a little bit easier. So next Saturday, 7th, is Winter Trail Half. So this week has been a little bit easier. And today has also been easier because I woke up and I was knackered. And I had a 13K half marathon effort session in. And I was like, Nick, nah, I'm not doing it. I can't.
Which is very, very relative to the podcast interview that will be coming up in a bit, because we had a pre-recorded. We had a really good chat with Mike James, our guest, didn't we, about exactly that kind of stuff, and catching yourself when you feel a little bit tired, and how to utilize rest and recovery, and when things need to be turned up and down. So very relative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I slept really well, but I woke up and thought I could have 3 more hours, and I thought now is not the time to be going out and doing a harder effort. So I just went and did an easy 5K and stopped and stroked a couple of dogs. So, which is quite normal for me. But yeah, so I feel better for that. And then, definitely listen to your body, folks.
Indeed. Should we do some shout outs real quick of who is
absolutely yes
this weekend? So
we've got quite a few, haven't we, running in the Cardiff Half Marathon?
Yes, I've got quite a few people racing this weekend, actually. I'm just looking through them all now.
So I'll start on the Cardiff train, and there's no trains running this weekend. So Cardiff Half on Sunday, and I would like to give a shout out to Jen Watkins, who is taking part, and this is her words. I forgot I had entered Cardiff Half. This is not recent. This is like 6 weeks ago, but she'd forgotten she'd entered. But it's great because the timing is fantastic, because she's got a very marathon at the end of October. So the timing works quite well anyway. So yes, Jen will be racing at Cardiff on Sunday. So good luck, Jen. I know you'll be great. Just enjoy it and use it as a little test for the bigger event to come.
Yeah, slightly different elevation profile between the two.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. But I said, let's work on fueling. Let's work on pacing, because she's not doing it to, the objective is not to do a PB or anything. It's to use it as a practice. So she's going to go through fueling and pacing and just enjoying it, because the atmosphere is always quite good down there. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Good luck, Jen. And then on my side, I've also got 2 people doing the Cardiff half. So I coach my sister, Michelle, she's the hardest person to coach out of everybody I've got, because she's my sister and we've never listened to each other. So yeah, coaching my sister has been quite a journey, but she's been dreaming of a sub 2 at Cardiff for 6 years, I think, and she should run a 154. So quite a significant chunk of time coming off her previous PB, which I think was like 204, 205. So yeah, she's in great shape. She's done some great training and actually listened to me. So that's good.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I've also got Rachel Lewis, who is doing the Cardiff half as well. She's been on a massive comeback since a meniscus tear bruising thing a couple of years ago, and she did her first race a few weeks ago at the Barry Island 10K and had an absolutely fantastic race. So hopefully she's going to be okay for the weekend, because there's all sorts of COVID-y, virus-y things going around at the moment, and she didn't feel particularly amazing at the end of last week. So hopefully she's shaken that off now, and she should have a good race as well. No, not looking at times or anything, just wanted to go and have a good race. So looking forward to seeing everybody at Cardiff on Sunday, because I'm going to go down and watch. I was supposed to be running it myself, but I'm not. And then I've got doing the Bangor 10K, not Bangor, Wales, but Bangor in Northern Ireland. Deb Murray, she's only 2 weeks after doing the Chiltern Wonderland 50 miler. So this is definitely not a PB attempt. This is just she had it booked and wanted to do it, and it'll just be a little run out for her. So good luck to Deb. And I've also got Zhang Ru. She is doing a challenge on Saturday. It's an online challenge with some of her running club friends. She needs to run 15K in 1 hour 25. So she's doing that this week. And then we've also got Emma, who is doing the Great Scottish Half and 10K consecutively on the same day. Yeah, so she's doing the half marathon and the 10K straight afterwards. So it's something that you can do. So good luck to Emma. Not something we're particularly focused on. She's actually mid ultra training, so it was ideal for her to go and just get that time on feet and do a double run day basically. So good luck to Emma. And then and that's the other one I've got is Sean is doing the Rother Valley 10K. Sean's one of my newer athletes. He's about 5 or 6 weeks in now. He has done a fantastic job of losing 40 pounds in weight. He used keto to do that, so we've been reintroducing him back to the lovely world of carbohydrates, and he's running pretty well. So I'm quite excited to see what he does on Sunday. So that's it. So good luck, everybody.
Good luck, everyone. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So shall we jump over to the interview that we did with Mike, all about rest and recovery? Some amazing stuff. And anybody who is listening to this right now, please listen right to the end, because there's just gold after gold after gold on a subject that isn't particularly sexy, is it? Rest and recovery.
No, but I tell you what, I left that buzzing, and obviously I left it and went straight to bed, which was great. But it's just that thing of I think this is something people need to talk more about and be okay with. And listen, folks, listen right to the end, because there's some gems in there. So yeah.
Before we do, just a quick shout out to our partners who are Runderwear, Talk, Protein Works, Ugoku Projects, True Start Coffee, Soulmate Running Shop in Little Old Merthyr, but they do have an online shop, and also most recently X Miles as well, which is fantastic, because what we are doing with all of those is if you join our Patreon for a very small fee, which will also help us to keep recording podcasts. Please join our Patreon, and not only will you get discount with all of those lovely providers, those lovely partners of ours, literally one order from any one of those, and you've paid back you've got back your little Patreon fee. But also, we've been uploading loads of great content on there to help you with your running as well. So it's not just about some discounts, but also, how we can help you with your nutrition and fueling strategies, and all of the recordings of our hot seats are on there, so you can actually see us talking and just get a little bit more context on some of these things. And just all there to help you with your running. So please do join the Patreon. It helps us to continue putting out podcasts, and you get something back in return. So without further ado, our guest, Mike James. Mike James, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the invite.
No worries. Well, as we were sort of reminiscing is probably the wrong word. Maybe I was reminiscing, but the reason I invited Mike on the podcast was because I went to a talk of his. I think it was maybe 5 years ago now. Does that sound about right?
It's pre-pandemic, and it's probably around that time, yeah.
Yeah.
I think pre-pandemic seems like a century ago.
yeah, doesn't it? Mike put on a fantastic talk, and I still refer to some of the things that Mike said then, now. So hopefully they're still current, and we're going to find out today.
Most of it is.
Yeah. So yeah, Mike, why don't you, first of all, kick off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my name is Mike James. I'm a physio who runs a business called TheEndurancePhysio based in South Wales. My background is long. I'm old, but effectively since the 90s, I've been in fitness or physio or sports rehab, through the military, through elite sport, through recreational sport. I've spent time as a full-time triathlete for a couple of seasons myself, and I do lots of endurance events myself. But between coaching and physio and as an athlete, I've been in and around swim, bike, run in its all various forms and evolutions for a quarter of a century, effectively. And that's where I'm fortunate enough now to spend all my time and days, is helping people of all abilities and ages. I've almost exclusively stepped away from the elite sports stuff. There's still a couple who I still work with, but effectively now most of my pleasure is educating normal people. I'll put that in the nicest possible way. Normal people to just bust some of the myths and misconceptions that is thrown at us in so many facets of physio or fitness or training, which sends us down rabbit holes we don't need to, which spends money that we don't need to, delays progress beyond what we ever need to, and sort of it's my one-man stand rebellion, and I know I'm not the only one. You guys are doing.
I'm right there with you, mate. Trust me.
but it's almost fighting the tide of just the nonsense. So I'm fortunate that my week's quite diverse. There's some in-person and online coaching. There's some in-person and online treating. There's some in-person and online teaching. So it's quite nice to be able to be diverse and have flexibility in my week. But I tend to be a stuck record talking about the same stuff over and over again.
I feel you there. And you say about sort of normal people. I know exactly what you mean. We're not working with pros day in, day out. We are trying to help, people who just want to do really well.
Yeah, certainly like my military background and my time with elite sport, it's quite easy to think you're better than you are. Because you've got these people who have got 24/7 to throw at you. I had a rank structure in the military where I told them what to do and they had to do it. So you can leave those sort of comfy environments, safe environments, really overestimating your ability at helping people. And it's only then when you start having, as we say in inverted commas, normal people. And when I class people, I say everyone's an athlete, whatever level of your performance. When I say normal, I just mean that you have to deal with the pressures of life, kids, work, stress, limited hours to train. Those are the things that really good therapists and coaches manage with people. It's easy to coach elite people who are full-time because they can do whatever you want, when you want, and as much of it as you want.
Yeah.
But trying to get someone to train for events that require a minimum amount, but they perhaps are only just struggling to meet that. And, Monday, Tuesdays are long days in work. They can't train at all. Wednesday, Thursdays, you've got limited time. So now they've turned into the weekend warrior where they're getting 70% of their training in. And it's not perfect, but it's all they can do. And your management of them has to be perfect for them, not perfect per se. So I think it's actually makes it a tougher job, and you have to be more skilled as a therapist or coach. But we don't think of it sometimes. Sometimes I'll have people approach me all the time. Oh, you probably don't want to work with me. I'm just like average. I'm like, you're exactly who I want to work with.
Yeah.
You're exactly who I want to work with, because the and as well, and if any of the elites that I've worked with in history hear me say this, they know I've said it to their faces, but they're dickheads, most of them. They're really hard work, because literally, and I'm not there for my, accolades from it, but if everything works well and success comes, it's obviously down to them. And should success not come in whatever form it's measured, then it's your fault. So they're hard work, and yet you don't get that with most of us lot.
Yeah, no, you're right. I get it all the time. I get people coming to me going, "Oh, I'm really slow," but I'm like, "Hold on a second, you're slow. It's somebody else's PB, so you're not slow." Well, thank you, Mike. This is probably going to be the Welshest podcast ever, because I'm from South Wales. Faye is not from South Wales, but lives in South Wales.
Yeah.
And where is it you actually live in South Wales?
So I'm originally a Llanelli Swansea boy, but I've lived away for the best part of 20 years. When we moved back, my wife's from Cwmbran, which is East Wales, and we settled for a NATO peacekeeping line right in the middle. So we live in a town called Cowbridge, which is 5 minutes outside Cardiff.
Posh.
Nice. Very posh.
Very expensive. Very bloody expensive. But it was bizarre. We looked on a map, somewhere in the middle that's nice, and we wouldn't mind letting the kids grow up there. And we are 44.3 miles from door to door from both sets of parents.
Wow.
So, spooky. Still about 50 miles too close for my liking, both sides. but yeah, we're 10 minutes outside Cardiff, the easiest way to put it.
Yeah.
Which means we've got plenty of coastal path within 10 minutes. And we've got the mountains within an hour. So so we're pretty blessed.
Yeah, nice. Great. Well, I'm an Abergavenny boy. I don't live there anymore, but I live just outside of Bath in a place called Corsham, which incidentally
I used to live in.
Faye used to live, but she lives in Monmouth.
Spent time in Corsham in my military days. Used to be.
Oh, there you go.
There.
It's literally the MOD is next door to me.
Yeah. Spend time there.
Yeah. Anyway, nobody needs us. Well, so let's get on with it. So, Mike, I brought you on today because I love some of the stuff that you talk about when it comes to rest and recovery for athletes. And we'll probably delve into a little bit of injury stuff as well, because there's so much chaff out there, quite frankly, when it comes to recovery. And I get people coming to me going, I spent 2 hours on the massage gun. I'm like, oh, brilliant. How did you sleep last night? And they go, oh shit, 4 hours. Like, put the massage gun away and get an extra 2 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And I love some of the things you say. So let's kind of get into it. So I guess let's start with a really generic and broad question of what are some of the biggest myths that you see about rest and recovery when it comes to running training? Obviously we're talking about running here. I know your background is kind of all across, but in the endurance world, what are those myths?
Yeah, well, I think the answers are the same across all the factions of endurance world, but I think number one would always be just this belief that rest is rust. This mantra that lies sort of in tandem with go hard or go home type attitudes.
Oh, yeah.
That effectively, rest is a negative thing that's going to have a detrimental effect on your performance. You have to be doing something active to be able to be better. And I get it's hard. We've all been there. It's hard to sit on your bum sometimes. And again, it obviously then means we need to quantify what rest is and recovery is. But I think that's the biggest mental block I deal with most athletes is you're telling me to do less than I think I should. Someone else has told me to do. I have been doing. I want to do. And then that when they sort of turn the corner into believing that, okay, maybe this rest thing is something I should think of or need to do. And invariably, the two catalysts for that is injury or lack of performance goals. The lack of meeting their performance goals. They're normally the things that kick in for them to suddenly go, okay, I'm doing the same thing, getting the same outcome, and it's not the outcome I want. This bloke's been banging on in my ear about rest and recovery for a while. Perhaps I should listen. What they then suddenly take it as that it is a very passive intervention. So I'm a big fan of people trying to understand that rest is actually an active live process of your training and your performance cycle. And it's something that when I'm programming for my athletes, it's literally written into the plan. It's a deliberate strategy and a deliberate ploy that we actively pursue to be able to do it, which probably segues nicely into the final bit to answer that question, is that when they are then doing rest or recovery, that it's always standardized. I think the reason people, and the classic one is if you think of someone's training plan, they'll do like 3 weeks of progressive overload and a week's recovery week.
Lazy.
And fine.
Such a lazy periodization.
Yeah. Not a bad strategy, but what does that recovery week really need to look like? And most people then, let's say, it's that classic time of year now, everybody's thinking of starting a 6-month plan to a spring marathon, for example. 3 weeks of motivated running, and they'll go, oh, shit, I don't need a down week. What's going on? This is, it's boring and rubbish. I'm just going to keep running. When what they really need to be going is, no, you just like you periodize your training, periodize your recovery. If you're not training that hard, your volume's quite low, you're not really running that intensely, maybe you need a recovery day every month. Maybe you need half a recovery session once a week. But when you get into your peak periods and you've got huge volumes and you're hard, maybe it's a recovery week at that point. So it should absolutely be periodized in tandem to reflect what your training looks like. And therefore becomes this less of this standardized burden that everyone, oh, bloody hell, I'm in a recovery week. The other facet of running that I'm spending more time talking about in recent years is tapering. And I say the same thing to tapers. Why are you all doing the same taper all the time for every event? You might not taper for some races. You might have mini tapers for other ones. It depends on the race.
Yeah.
That's the sort of attitude I want people to start to take with rest and recovery, that it should be equal and relative to the training load that you're under, and therefore it becomes less of a burden for most people to start implementing.
Yeah, exactly. Talking right to where I'm sort of trying to talk to my runners at the moment around, understanding what the role of rest is. And actually, that's where the magic happens. And we should think of it as actually part of our training, that it isn't a rest day because you're knackered. It's a rest day because we need you to adapt to the stress that we've just put you through.
There's a really nice quote. I think it's from Shona Halson. So we'll mention some research, no doubt. And there's a professor from the Australian Institute of Sport called Shona Halson, Shona. She's probably one of the leading guys and girls in the world around the science of research, of recovery right now. And I believe it's her quote, but it might be someone else, and she's said it herself, that we need to start understanding that recovery isn't just about getting over the sessions we've just done. It's actually preparing for the sessions we've got to come.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the reason you've got an easier day on a Tuesday is because of what's coming on Saturday, not because of what happened on Monday or Sunday. And I think that straight away switches that proactive approach rather than a reactive approach in an athlete. Okay, that's why I'm doing this, because of what's to come.
Yeah.
So that's a real nice sort of quote that I like to throw at them sometimes. Of just, no, it's about what's to come as well as what's been. Yeah. And they go, oh, okay. And it's I think it's easy sometimes to blame athletes and sort of go, I can't believe the way they think. There's not a single runner I've ever met who self-sabotages on purpose, who does the wrong things on purpose, who chooses to go, you're talking rubbish, I'm just going to do my own thing. Most people set out with the best of intentions and just either don't know better or are too scared to try something different. So it is sometimes just planting the seed and go, look, have a think about that. We'll chat about it next time I see you. I don't want to just blurt on send to you for the next 10 minutes and it just goes straight over. Have a little read of this. I often email someone a bit of research or a video I've done in the past or whatever. So just watch that and ask me any questions afterwards if you've got any things that's popped up.
Mike, when it comes to offering kind of simple advice to athletes around self-care and their recovery, what would you say are your top 3 pieces of advice that you give to someone that like you say, sometimes it's a challenge to get someone to change their thinking around recovery? What would you say your top few tips are?
My soundbite for the old podcast, which I'll probably mention dozens of times, is that I think, and this is everything, but really specifically to recovery. We just need to learn to be world class at the basics and stop trying to be basic at the world class. Everybody wants the little finicky, sexy stuff that makes marginal gains, but they don't work on the big stuff. So we'll quantify that and we'll delve into that. But as an overarching top tip, it's look, learn to be world class at the basics, which probably is a mantra they'd serve well following as far as training and stuff goes as well. And you know, what are those world class basics when it comes to recovery? Well, sleep is number one. Yeah. You know, that's our superpower. We've got an unquestionable bank of evidence and research to tell us just how important sleep is. Yeah, it's the thing most of us are really, really bad at. So we know, for example, that if you, and we'll discuss the numbers per se, but there's really nice studies out there that those who sleep less than 8 hours a week, 8 hours a night, will have about a 1.7 to 1.9 times greater risk of injury than those that do. Likewise, if you sleep less than 5 hours a night, you've probably got 4.5 times more likelihood of getting illnesses. Now, the thing that most people throw back to that is, well, I've only ever slept 5 hours a night. So I'm always, sort of the caveat I always employ with stuff like that is, yeah, okay, don't worry about the actual number. The principle of that is if you can increase your sleep slightly, you're probably reducing your chance of illness and injury. If your sleep is much disturbed, then you're probably increasing it. I will often some of the people I coach, these normal people that we talk about, they're shift workers, night workers. Mm-hmm. So my training plans will absolutely change on the weeks they're on night shift because their sleep patterns are going to be all over the place.
Yep.
And it's very much an attitude of sleep is your priority this week, not training. So we'll amend your training unless it's at a period where we need to do certain things. But even though then, if it's a choice of miss training or miss sleep, you get your sleep in first. We'll deal with what we miss later on. But that's the number one thing. And there's nothing more important than the sleep. But it's not sexy. It's boring to say, just sleep more. People want these gadgets and gimmicks. And there's $1 billion industry out there that do a really good job of telling people that's what they think they need as well. So then moving on from the sleep, top tip number two would be nutrition. Just literally, and again, we don't need to be fancy and in-depth with it. Most people are getting nowhere near the basics. You know, and again, I'm not a nutritionist and I tend not to give any more specifics than my advice and my experience of nutrition. But I'm saying to most people, you know, just take a 10,000 foot view of macronutrients and the appropriate amount and fuel in your body to do the things you're asking to do. And you probably won't go far wrong. And then you can worry about the minutiae with the appropriately qualified people when the gains have been made that those will elicit first. Which then sort of brings on that third tip, which is very much along the lines of when people, and it echoes the world class at the basic stuff, most people will fall for the gadgets and the gimmicks because of this whole Team Sky, British cycling inspired marginal gains type concepts. And they absolutely matter. Those 5% absolutely matter, but only when you've got the 95% nailed first. Most of us are chasing 5-6% gains, the bloody super shoes being the classic example, right? Yeah, their sleep, recovery, training, their food, it's all over the place. There's 50% of easy wins for a lot less money if they just concentrate on the boring stuff and embrace that monotonous consistency that we're all striving for, and then worry about the little stuff at the end. And it always feels like a deflection. But when, you know, I constantly get asked, like, which massage gun should I buy? What do you think of acupuncture? Like, and my answer is, let's not talk about that yet. Let's talk about your sleep, your nutrition, your recovery. What's your training plan look like? Because there's holes there that we really need. You know, we've got a sinking ship and you're worrying about what color you're going to paint it. Let's plug the holes first and make it a better ship. And then we'll worry about painting it when it matters. Yeah, so they'd probably be a long-winded way of giving 3 tips.
No, but they're just fundamentals of life, aren't they, really? And I suppose with how life has become busier and busier, they are the few things that have become the least important. And, you know, it doesn't just impact people's training, it impacts their work, their life. And, you know, I'll be honest, if I got told to sleep for an extra 3 hours a night, I'd go for it. Like, great, crack on. you know. But yeah, it is a really tricky conversation to have with people.
It's tough. And you'll have people who will, they'll be there now in their sort of ice baths is the big one now. Everyone's buying their bloody ice baths at home.
I have to say, I love an ice bath, but I do get 8 hours of sleep. I do eat really well, and I do concentrate on my recovery, so I'm allowed to.
Ice baths, the massage guns have been there, the shiny tape, the old sort of compression socks, the vibrating compression, Normatec type stockings and stuff. Yeah. And they'll tell you about these hours and hours of stuff they're doing every night, but then they binge watch Netflix till 2:00 in the morning every night.
Yeah.
And you're like, those things fine, but then bang off to bed. And we're not turning everyone into monks and nuns and saying you need to be in bed at 9 every night and all of this stuff. But can you eke an extra hour out? If you can't, if something's popped up and, people with young kids who's keeping them awake at night, blah, 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 fine, tweak your training that period.
Yeah.
You can't expect to be going that hard as when you're getting good sleep, when you're not getting good sleep. So you change the dynamic from the other end.
And that's that's really hard, though, isn't it? Because I'm constantly doing that. If somebody says to me, "Oh, Nick, I slept like shit last night," but I'm about to head out for my 5x5 minute hard VO2 max intervals. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. You slept like shit last night. How do you feel? What's going on? Oh, I haven't really eaten much. I can't be bothered. I'm like, right, okay, no, stop. Let's just go out for an easy run. If you want to go and run, just clear your head. Fine. But you always met with, or almost 100% of the time, some sort of resistance. Oh, but if I don't do that session though, I'm not going to run a 4-hour marathon. It's going to be a 5-hour marathon. I'm like, that's not going to happen by missing one session.
Yeah. And we're fighting a current. We're swimming upstream against a really powerful current coming the other way. Even today, I spoke to an athlete who is absolutely fascinated and motivated by the David Goggins type, man up, crack on. If you're not sort of strong enough, you're just weak and all of this stuff. And I'm like, well, there's times that might be appropriate, but not all the time and not now. And the reason we're chatting is because you're broken again. You're not the first time we've chatted over the last couple of years. And it's because you've gone into this hero sort of mindset of like, if it go hard or go home, if it ain't hurting, no pain, no gain stuff still exists.
It does. It's funny, actually. I've got a text message right here from today from a lady called Sharon that I coach saying, Nick, there's an S&C class I'd like to go to. Does that fit in with my training? And I said to her, it depends on what they're going to do with you, because if it's the go hard, go home type of training, I don't want you doing that because it's probably going to ruin your next 3 days worth of running. So yeah, and she did come back to say, no, it wasn't that. But there are so many of those out there. I've had athletes in the past who, gone to work with a PT. And I remember one athlete having DOMS for almost 2 weeks because she got brutalized by a PT.
Yeah. And it's also, sadly, plenty of coaches, plenty of therapists out there, even if they're not promoting that type of mantra, they're supporting it in their athletes because they think it's what their athletes want to hear.
100%.
And it's sometimes the hardest bit is to just say to someone, look, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. I when I'm coaching people, I tend to do like a discovery call. So I'll have a chat with them to see if they like me and if I like them and how my system works and all this sort of stuff. And I probably say no to athletes more than the other way around. Because I can just smell that we're not going to get on well. You're not going to like the way I coach you. And I never say it other than, look, I just think for these reasons, I just think I might not be the best coach for you. Never flip the blame around going, look, you're not going to follow what I want you to do, blah, blah, blah. I just go, look, I think the way I like to work is probably not going to be the best way for you. Maybe you want to investigate some other options and see if they'd be more suited to you. But effectively, 9 times out of 10, it's me sort of thinking, you're just not going to listen here. You're not going to do the things that I think work best. Or in a more realistic way, be able to collaborate and work together and come to a joined up decision, an agreed decision that suits both.
And I say it all the time because that's what coaching is, isn't it? It's not, we're not telling people what to do. Of course, we're here to be, the fountain of knowledge that you need, but it is a partnership. I say that all the time. It's a partnership.
Yeah. Someone will message me, this has happened in my life. Mike, what do you reckon? I go, what do you think? What do you think we should do? Well, I think I could do this. Fine. Is that feasible? Well, actually, maybe that, okay, let's tweak that day, but let's stick with the outline of what it's your body, your plan. You know what you're going to be able to do. And I'll, as you say then, be able to shape it and guide you and make sure we're going down the right parameters of that stuff. But there's plenty of people who aren't, sadly. There's plenty of people, oh, he's a good egg. He goes till he bleeds from the eyeballs. I'm like, that's not a clever thing. That's not something you should be looking up to in the running club or in the people that you wrap yourself around. If you're not breaking, you're almost not training hard enough type approach. It's just so 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And
it is so 50 years ago, but scarily is still very prevalent. And I was only talking to a friend at the weekend about that. And only a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a team manager, and he basically said, if you want to reach this level again, you're going to have to push yourself beyond anything you've done before. And that might mean training through injury. And I just looked at him and thought, there's no way I'm doing that. That's not how I will ever get back to that point. And nor should you be telling anyone that that's how you get back to that point. And that, I think, is shocking. And I just worry for, more susceptible athletes or younger, athletes who hear that and think that's normal. And, it's not.
No. And there's times, there's ultra runners, for example, particularly those doing like multi-day events when I'm coaching them. We absolutely want to program periods of interrupted recovery. We want them to be fatigued. We want them to simulate being able to run through the night, being able to do it repeatedly. And we factor in periods where we really are challenging the recovery side. In fact, we're probably ripping up the books that we've used ourselves and just breaking it to pieces. But it's bookended with preparation and recovery phases that factor that in.
Yeah, it's all
and it's all done with a strategy, and it's all done with a goal. In clinic, I'll take people on who've broken in the early phases of a training plan that's supposedly 20 weeks long. And I'm like, something's absolutely fundamentally wrong with your plan if you've broken in week 3.
Yeah.
And normally it's because it's either got no rest and recovery or just it's so miniature compared to what they're asking them to do training volume wise that the gulf's just too big between the two.
I want to go back to the sleep thing, if you don't mind. So two parts to it. Number one, for the people listening, sort of what tips have you got? Because people, you said it yourself, people find it so hard with sleep, of course, if you've got things like kids and interruptions like that, that's maybe a little bit different. You can't just, tape their mouth shut and lock their door. But, what are the kind of, I guess, protocols, for want of a better word, that you might say to somebody, look, these are the things you could do to get you to sleep better tonight?
Yeah, there's two general approaches. They're not suited for everyone. And probably when you look at the guidelines, it's more of a interpreted to suit yourself. So the thing that's taken the biggest awareness in the last 10 years is this whole horrible concept of sleep hygiene. And I hate the concept of sleep hygiene because it suggests there's a dirty way to sleep as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sleep, it's good sleep, whatever happening. But that is all very much about having your environment with a certain lighting, turning off your electronic devices, starting to wind yourself down, even having sort of temperature controls within the bedroom and that type of stuff. And I think that's very much that sort of approach that by the science, that's probably exactly what you need to do. How feasible, how realistic it is, particularly, you might live with someone who gets freezing in bed and they want the heating on and all that sort of stuff goes out the window. I think from that approach, the biggest thing that I think most people should do, if feasible, in whatever timescale that suits for them, is just more this preparing to go to sleep type of thing. Number of people who they go to bed, you have a shower, clean teeth, get into bed, and they check their phone for an hour, on social media for an hour, just stimulating all of those things. And then they're the ones tossing and turning for an extra hour because their brains can't wind down a little bit. So I know how much tech and, my whole business is done on my phone, so on my laptop. So I'm the worst in the world to try and implement that regularly. But it is sometimes just that little thing of just I've got an athlete who's really good at it, where I might send her a message late at night and I'll just get this message that she's silenced all the notifications. And I'm like, oh, nice one, Zoe. I know you're in bed and you're trying to get your sleep in. Nothing I've sent you is going to burn the world down if you don't read it until the morning, but she's just put one of those plans in. Then they've got this whole sort of routine, which again, it doesn't feel feasible when people read it, but It's like giving yourself 20, 30 minutes in bed. If you're not asleep in that 20, 30 minutes, you get up, you do something, and you try to reinstigate the process from the start. Again, I think most people just get frustrated and give up before those habits take effect.
Yeah.
We know that creating habits takes hundreds of days sometimes for people to be consistent with them. So it's trying to put those routines in, I think, I don't like the sleep hygiene or the tips that a lot of them have, but I think trying again, it goes back to the original point we chatted about, is seeing recovery as a active process. So it's performance enhancing for you to try to implement your sleep for you to be able to train better. It's not doing less. It's not doing nothing. It's not passively doing something. It's not a training intervention, but it's something that might. Particularly those, you'll see tons of people who get frustrated because they'd like to run in the mornings, but they always say, I'm no good at getting up. Now, I've read quite a lot of research on sleep, and there is this fascinating concept that we have people who are owls or larks. There's some people, I'm 100% an owl. I very rarely go to bed early. I tend to wake up and produce better work in the evenings. Once we finish recording, that's when I'm going to go and do my training. I cannot get up in the mornings and train. But should I want to get up in the mornings and train, I can't live off the sleep habits I've got now and expect to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I need to adjust something there intentionally to make a change the other end. And then the second part then is a growing body of evidence. How feasible they are for a lot of people, I don't know. Maybe working from home is better. But we're starting to see really good, strong evidence for the power of napping in the day, so that you just bank a little bit more sleep and you just recharge the batteries a little bit more.
100% with that. I've done that quite a lot, where I'm like, do you know what? I'm just going to close my eyes for 15 minutes. And my God, best thing ever. Sometimes it's happened accidentally, but honestly, I love a nap.
Yeah,
That's something I'm not very good at. I have never
love a nap.
Yeah.
I've never been a napper since I was a baby. My mum used to try and drive for miles and miles and miles to try and get me to sleep, but I just won't nap.
No, and it'll work for some, particularly maybe that retired population. We see more and more of those guys who are running these days.
That's what I'm aiming for, retirement.
People who work from home. And again, it's all about those incremental gains that don't take too much of a dent or change to your lifestyle as is. But when you look back at the last 12 months, not the last 12 weeks, and you've gone 15 minutes, 4 times a week, is an hour a week, 4 hours a month, I've suddenly gained, dozens and dozens of extra hours of sleep without all the fuss and furore of setting my temperature in my room for a certain temperature and counting sheep and doing all the usual stuff, which is a chore and is a bind and is often harder to implement. So it's the little things sometimes. And again, what is that 15 minutes? It's normally scrolling around your bloody social media on lunchtime.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the best things I've done for my sleep is I now charge my phone, not next to my bed. I put it downstairs on the opposite end of the house where it's nowhere near me. I go to bed, I read my Kindle. So I do have a device, but it at least is reading. And I usually fall asleep and it falls on the floor and makes my wife jump because it's whacked the side table. But that has been one of the biggest things for me, was leaving my phone somewhere else in the house. And I swear by, I've got a cup here of sleepy tea. I love it. Yeah. Absolutely swear by it. And I think that's now become just sort of my ritual.
Yeah. Last thing I do before bed every night, always have done, is a cup of tea. Everyone's like, oh, caffeine, you'll be awake. No, it really helps me sleep. Which I'm not saying that's what everyone needs to do, but that's part of my routine now to make myself fall asleep.
Yeah, it's different for everyone, isn't it? And
So then the second bit I wanted to ask you about with sleep is watches. All of that sleep score, HRV data that Garmin's are spitting out now. Is it wheat or is it chaff? And what can we use it for, if anything?
Yeah, I think so all of them, some are better and worse than others, but generally the problem with all of those things is they work off algorithms. And they're not accurate in any shape or form. I see athletes stressing over the slightest number. My mate's got this, I've got this, or 6 months ago I had this. Like the minutiae and the day-to-day stuff is absolutely probably not as useful as people think it is. But where those things do come in really useful is just trends. Are things going up or down for better or worse over time? And if they are, we either double down on what we're doing or we need to change something. So how does that trend of the heart rate variability is a really good one. Not really asked on what the numbers are. But if we're implementing a training plan and it's pitched right and the trends, not the numbers, but the trends are improving over the last 3 to 6 months, we're probably doing something right.
And that's actually really key. That time scale that you just gave there is really key. Because people will go, oh my God, my HRV was 10 last night. Am I going to die? I'm like, no. What we're looking for is your HRV bad over a period of, I tend to say 2 to 3 weeks. And if it is kind of on the lower side, then maybe there is a little bit of an underlying something. But I always come back to, how do you feel? And if you can honestly answer that question with, well, I feel pretty good, then you probably are. And if somebody says, I have felt pretty shit, then you probably are feeling a bit shit.
There's a Texan sports scientist who's based in Norway, a guy called Stephen Seiler. He's the guy who's reputed and well known for inventing the sort of 80-20 type approach. And he used to spend a lot of time working with elite Nordic skiers, so uber endurance athletes. Yeah. And a lot of them were females, a lot of them had long hair. And he said the most scientific metric he ever used when it came to monitoring someone's rest, recovery, and sleep was the hair in the yogurt test. So if he came down to breakfast in the morning and someone's hair was in their yogurt, he needed to change their training that day.
Very good.
Eddie Jones, who's obviously Wales' best friend right now, but Eddie Jones, a rugby coach in his England days, is often quoted as going, the best meetings and methods he ever had for gauging where his players were the little corridor chats or the elevator chats where I do a lot of online coaching, but every time I speak to an athlete, it's via a video call because I need to see what's going on. Yeah. I don't want a text message. Obviously, we deal with some text messages, etc. But I need to see you, listen to you, because ultimately, I learn you and I learn to know you. And if you're not what I'm expecting to see, then we need to change something. But when someone does get in touch with that sort of, I've woken up this morning and this has happened on my metrics, then there's normally this knee jerk of what do I need to do to my training? When actually it's like, right, let's just pause. Tell me about the last couple of days. If we can justify why that thing has happened, then cool, let's not worry about it. It's going to settle down again. Maybe we make a little adjustment today or tomorrow, or we just push through knowing that, okay, we've said today that we want to do a certain percentage of heart rate training or a rate of perceived exertion scale. And let's say today's plan was that we go 7 out of 10. Do the same session, but let's just do 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. And we don't even need to adjust the plan. We just micro adjust some bits of it and then we're fine. Drop me a message in the morning. Let me know if it's settled back down. And you'll see it sometimes. I mean, literally, it's like, I did have half a bottle of wine last night with the husband or the wife. Or I had a spicy curry. Or, I had a really crappy meeting at work yesterday and I got stuck in traffic on the way home and, probably a bit stressed. Yeah. Cool. Let's just diffuse the whole situation and just bring it back to normal stuff.
I do sometimes think that all this technology creates this lack of rational thinking in people, because before these watches, we were perfectly able to decide whether we were feeling okay or not. Yep. And I think it was last week, I saw someone completed their first 70.3. And I was thinking back to when I did mine. I wore a Casio, and I don't even remember how long that race took me to complete because I have no record, because there was no, but do you know what I mean? There was no data, and it's probably in a notebook somewhere, but people forget how to feel what's right in themselves or what isn't right in themselves. And people don't spend enough time, I don't think, focusing on feel. That simple, free concept that we all have.
Yeah. I am so glad I'm the age I am, because I, like you guys, a really good example is
I'm quite old as well, by the way, Mike.
Yeah. think of driving. We learned to drive when, if you were going anywhere far, you got an atlas.
Yes.
And you wrote down on a piece of paper where you were going, which junction you had to get off. The only bit that was ever hard, where sat-navs really helped, was the last mile. Just before you got there.
Yeah. Totally.
But by the time sat-navs came in, you had this relatively good geographical baseline of, Birmingham's north of here and that's west of there. And as long as I head roughly to there, I can sort of work it out afterwards. And then sat-navs became really useful. youngsters of today don't know where anything is and how to get there. They don't know what the next county is because all they've ever done is use tech.
Yeah.
And it's the same with modern endurance athletes. If you've only got into it since the invention of tech, exactly what you said, Faye, they don't understand what feel like. Now, you can reverse engineer it. They can do it backwards.
Yeah.
But when tech came in for us, it was like, oh, well, I know how I feel. I think I'm around this. Oh, look, I am.
Yeah.
You know, I could, I remember literally being like 17, 18 and having the first ever polar heart rate monitor.
Oh, yes.
And then the pacing watches and stuff. And I used to genuinely think, before I was able to measure these metrics, I reckon I'm running at 7:10 pace. I reckon I'm running at 6 minute mile pace. These things came out and I'm like, oh my God, I'm spot on.
Yeah.
Because I'd learned what those paces sort of felt like. And now I've got a metric to balance it. Remember, I think it was in lockdown or just between the lockdowns when Garmin went out for a couple of days.
Oh God!
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Like,
The whole
literally,
world fell apart.
the world lost their shit. They're just like, what do I do? And I went mad on social media with the whole, right, you go out and you just run to feel. You forget the watch and you learn what it feels like to run at this effort or this pace. And you learn to roughly gauge how far you think you've gone or whatever. So most of them, and then they'll say, like, you know, if I take a potential athlete on, I'll say, right, what metrics do you want me to send? And, well, which ones do you think are important to you? Because they normally just send me everything. And it's like paralysis by analysis. They don't even know what half of these things mean, and yet they're worried about them. That's the marketing and the BS that's had such an influence. Like, the only thing I really care about is X, Y, and Z. Send me them.
Yeah.
But don't worry about the rest, because I want to talk to you. I want to find out how you feel. And if we put some metrics into those conversations because it adds value, then fine. But let's stop measuring stuff and tracking stuff just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, Nick, you know, how do you feel? Yeah, I feel great. Cool. How do you feel? I'm knackered. Okay. Let's look at the last couple of weeks. Yeah. Based on what we had as our intention for that block, that's probably what we want. Let's factor in a bit more recovery now to get you out to that state and super compensate moving forward. Oh, actually, I feel knackered. Okay, let's look at your training plan. We really shouldn't be knackered off what we've done in the last block. Anything in life that's going on? No, not really. Okay, we need to work something out here. There's a problem. Let's delve in the metrics. Let's look a bit closer at other stuff. But it should be a tool to support the stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
Not this anchor almost that we're driven, you know, this godlike thing that drives us forward, you know, and people will judge themselves on their whole person. I've got a TSS score of such and such. Like, it's their whole identity.
See, I don't even talk about that stuff.
No,
and when I do get asked, what does TSS mean, CTL, ATL, or all of that lovely stuff that's in Training Peaks that is very useful to us. But I say to my athletes all the time, first of all, don't worry about that. Let me worry about it. Unless you really want to get into it, then fine, we'll go into it. But don't let it be something you're worried about. I just want you to get out there and do the things that we're aiming to do. And yeah, with all that lovely data that comes through on Training Peaks, it means nothing without your subjective commentary and, you know, the chatting that we do all week, and, you know, the feedback that you give me on each session and each week, and all of that stuff can just go out the window. Because if I don't have that, you could do a session and hit all the paces, but unless you say to me, oh my God, you know, I'm broken after that, there's no way I could hold that for a whole half marathon, or you know, whatever it might be, or the other way, if somebody goes, yeah, I found that session really easy. Oh, well, you shouldn't have found it that easy. So actually, maybe we need to turn your the dials up. So
no, it's the blanket use of data these days to me is just like looking at a wedding photo with someone crying in it. Like, are they the happiest man in the world? They're crying because their daughter just got married, or are they crying because their best friend died yesterday? You have no idea of the context of that picture. You're just going to go, oh my God, someone's crying. Panic alarms going off. There's just no context to most of those metrics. And people then don't delve deep enough into the context to work out if they're important or not.
Yeah.
But Dave in the club does it. Sharon in the club does it. So I think, and they run 2 minutes park run faster than me. So it must be the right thing to do then.
Yeah.
You know, I just think runners need to spend so much more time asking why.
Yeah.
It's the what and the how is all they care about. But like, why is that important? And if someone they ask can't justify why it is or isn't important, perhaps like, hey, ask someone else. Reconsider the use of that thing, because it's probably not And again, having spent just on a recovery side, we'll believe everything we read because the superstars are doing it. I can think of half a dozen elites that I've worked with, well-known people, where I know damn well that some of the things they were promoting use of, they'd never been near, but they were financially incentivized to promote certain things, to say they use things. And then Joe Average is running out, spending hundreds of pounds on gimmicks because such and such said you use them. And I'm thinking, no, he doesn't. He does not use that. And even if he does use it, all of these big rocks are done first, and that's the icing on top. But you've been sucked in to go, that's what I need to make the difference.
Yeah.
Super shoes, completely different topic. But how many people are getting slightly faster in super shoes, but their training's awful?
Oh, don't get me started. Honestly, those bloody shoes, you don't need a bloody carbon plate in your shoe, and it's not going to make you a super runner. It drives me up the wall.
This new Adidas malarkey of the one-use, single-use, £500. Imagine if you said to a runner how this would go down if you went, right, that 500 quid, keep it in your pocket, go and see a nutritionist and spend 200 quid on a couple of sessions there. Go see a psychologist about running. Spend a couple of hundred quid there. Invest in a really good coach for 6 months. See how much gains you make then over your running shoes.
I have done that with some athletes. I have said, forget about that £300 pair of shoes.
Yeah.
I want you to go and get yourself £100 pair and spend the other 200 to go and see a nutritionist. I have said that.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting your nutrition right, and there's only so far I can advise, just like you were saying earlier. I'm not a nutritionist either. But you're right, it's like the whole Zoe thing. We talked about this in a podcast with Steve Winrow, my nutritionist, and it's gone through all the the athlete ranks. We saw a time where they were all wearing blood glucose monitors. Now it's made it into the public domain, and none of the elites are wearing them anymore because the data isn't particularly useful.
No.
And it's
ultimately, I think if my career was to start all over again, knowing what I know now, I'd probably go down the psychology route.
Yeah, 100%.
Because as a therapist and as a coach, all of my learning in the last 10 years has been about understanding behavior change, that type of stuff. And runner, I often will shock a room of runners and say, right, cool, we're going to chat about stuff. And some of the biggest problems we've got is that you lot are really lazy. And they're going to go, what? I run 50 miles a week. I do this, I do that. I go, I don't mean lazy that way. I mean, you're human beings, and humans are lazy. And you want the path of least resistance with the least effort to get you to A1. It's the triathlete whose first instinct is to buy a disc wheel when they've got absolutely no strength, no thoracic mobility, and they're 2 stone overweight.
Yeah.
Because actually it's boring and hard to do the stuff that's probably going to make the biggest difference. So again, it's those marginal gains, missing the maximal gains first.
Yeah.
And the super shoes is the runner's version of that.
Yeah.
This will make me 4% faster. Yeah, I could probably give you stuff that makes you 30% faster. And then when you can't get any more out of them, let's chuck the shoes on your feet.
Yeah.
But,
it's not sexy, is it?
But it's, but then Nike and others have got people who are super brains in the world of marketing and PR spending their whole day. We're chatting one-to-one with people and maybe a couple of hundred on a podcast, and they're putting millions of dollars into millions of minutes of just this constant brainwashing around these things. Can you imagine Adidas headquarters this week that having had years sitting behind Nike going, we're getting nowhere here, someone in their first time is going to smash the women's world record?
I bet on Monday morning there was some sore heads in that office.
They must have turned the money printing machine
in the champagne.
Yeah. Because they're literally now, that's license for them to print money for the next 5 years.
100%. Yeah.
I did say to Faye, actually, I think it was you, Faye. I said as soon as I saw the price of that shoe, the first thing I said was, "Oh shit, here we go again."
Yeah.
Now all shoes are going to go up in price.
100%. And I think it's
all the
ridiculous.
£60 shoes.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago when the Next Percents came out, all the £60 shoes became £100. Yeah. All the £100 shoes became £150.
Yeah. I think perhaps the night in Shining Armour on its white horse coming over the hill as far as Adidas one is the carbon and eco side of it. The fact that they're trying to get people to buy a single-use shoe, and I know they're happy to get them back and recycle them and all of this malarkey, but I'm like, I think that a lot of people out of principle will just go, no.
Yeah.
No, but again, that lady who's gone and done that, phenomenal. She's a 1% outlier who's got 100% of her maximal gain. She's probably sleeping properly. She's eating properly. She's training and recovering properly. And the shoes have eked out that tiny little bit extra from her.
Yeah. I bet she naps. I bet she takes naps.
Yeah. But that bit's not peddled with it,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, I want to sort of bring us on to just, we talked about those basics. So, what would be your sort of, I talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs type model when it comes to recovery. So, at the bottom there, sleep, good nutrition, good hydration, actually, actively pursuing recovery and rest days. What would you kind of, what would be above that layer for you?
Yeah, well, I'd be sneaky if I was to not say that. Like the one I'll quote now isn't even mine. This is what the science is saying. These are pyramids that are out there that are evidence-based. So right at the bottom, the most important thing is that appropriate training load.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sleep being the superpower, appropriate training load, appropriate nutrition. And then we sort of, as it thins out, we just turn into the fads then. And again, fads, not because they don't have some evidence, but because the evidence of effect is so little that it's not going to, if everybody improved their sleep, nutrition, and training, they're all going to get better. But if you then start putting in the things we've mentioned already, bit of massage guns, bit of foam rolling, bit of compression stuff, ice baths, even down to some of those nutritional stuff like the cherry and the beetroot juices and stuff, you'll find small evidence of effect for some of them with some people, but nowhere near what should be inverting that pyramid, where, in fact, what is the PR pyramid is just the inverted pyramid. It's the sexy stuff. Because it's very hard to sell sleep to someone, either as a belief system or as an actual thing. There's no product to sell unless you're selling mattresses and pillows and stuff. But effectively, invert that, and that's what most people think. It's about the little faddy bits first, when actually they're the 5%, 1% stuff at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. Okay, I want to play a little game with you. And I wish I thought of this before. We could have all done like 1 to 5. 1 being totally useless, and 5 being absolutely useful. So I think we can all say sleep, nutrition, appropriate training load, 5s. Let's kind of go up the pyramid. Ice baths.
I think before ice baths, which is an extension of sleep in some ways, I'd put relaxation.
Okay.
I think in our awake hours, we can be a lot better at just switching off sometimes. There's plenty of people who don't affect their sleep too much, but they go through some of that mindfulness stuff, yoga, meditation, tai chi, breathing exercises. Again, I'm not, and I don't give those things to my athletes. I don't do it myself. I'm not an advocate of it, but again, you're probably going to find things are stronger in the evidence base for those. All of the other stuff, where I would struggle to do that game of what's next is the fact that most of them are just caveated with there's a nuance to them. So it's not that they don't work, it's just people are doing them wrong.
Yeah.
So the ice baths is a really good one. The number of people I know who ice bath every night. Now, if you're doing that because you find it relaxing, fine. But if you're doing it because of muscle damage, markers of muscle inflammation, and you think it's got a tissue level effect, then we actually know that if we do it in periods of heavy training and competition, it probably has a nice effect. But if we do it out of competition, out of heavy training for a prolonged period, it ends up having a negative effect.
Yeah.
So
I've talked about that on the podcast.
So it's the context of things like that, and massage guns, and foam rollers, and all of that stuff. Compression socks. I remember working with an athlete, and again, it's a really nice example of nuance. Worked with an athlete who literally would if he wasn't running, or he ran in compression sleeves, in compression socks type of thing. But when he had showered and changed, most of his evenings were walking around the house in the old recovery socks, the more bed socky type ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a really long chat with him about it. And I'm just about to launch into the little bit of evidence for it, why there's better things he could do and all this. And he dropped on me really sort of powerful thing. He said, but the thing is, Mike, if I run and I get home from my run and I have my shower and I put my compression socks on, I feel like an athlete. And what that probably leads to is when I go downstairs, I eat something a bit healthier. I cut down on my alcohol. I probably do go to bed a bit earlier because it makes me, it's an actual trigger for me to react to. He said, what I find is if I come back from that same run, have my shower, don't do those things, probably got my fingers in the biscuit tin. I probably have a can of beer. I probably watch an extra episode of Game of Thrones before I go to bed. That type of scenario. And the lifestyle factor of it is fundamentally different. And it made me pause for a minute and go, okay, we know about placebo and we know about all of those type of things. And I'm like, I can't really come back from that. You're not taking the last 50 quid out of your wallet and not feeding your kids to buy it. So that's not a factor either. But it actually is the far lesser of some evils for you to get some of the bigger things done. So I absolutely just zipped it and didn't say a word to him about it. But I've had others coming in where, I can't race on the weekend because I haven't got catered or something along those lines, and you're like, wow.
I remember you calling it
negative relationship with it.
Yeah, I remember at that talk at Chippenham that you came to saying the magic tape, you called it. The magic tape.
Yeah, it's magic tape and it's nothing magic at all. But people who want to sell that tape, people will be pushing that, it's hand woven in a mystical forest by elves. It's a magic glue in it. And you're like, no, it can help. It can work in the short term for someone for reasons not at the level you're told it is. Right. And some of those big companies in the States have been forced in legal action to pay a lot of money back to a lot of people for false claims. Mm-hmm. But again, they've done a good job of hiding it. One of them particularly ended up being fined the equivalent of giving everyone who'd ever bought a roll their money back, should they wish to chase it. For basically saying that it did things at tissue level that there's just no evidence to support. So false advertising, effectively. But all of those things, I would almost put them on one big chunky layer that it's everything else on top. And all that happens is you have a flavor of the month. Things just change. I've done a lot of personal training in my day, and you've seen all of these things come in and out of fashion of kettlebells and this and that and Bosu balls. A year later, they sit in the storeroom in a gym for the odd person to pick up now and again. And 10 years later, they'll come out under a different brand in a different guise with some other BS sort of concept behind it. And you go, it's just the same as such and such. And I've sort of been in the endurance game long enough now to see those things reinvent themselves in this sort of field. Well, that's just the same as what we used to do with this. Science hasn't changed. Evidence hasn't changed. Just there's a new breed of people pushing it to a new breed of people. So all of those things have some use at certain times in a plan at certain periods to help, whether it's placebo or marginal gains, but they just cannot cross that line in the sand of being ahead of other things.
Yeah.
And I think when you've got a belief in some of those things, I remember that when the particular person I was on about with the ice baths every day, this is a typical scenario that I tend to encounter. So this guy was a recreational triathlete, had ended up being really serious and doing okay, was an age group level sort of athlete. But he ended up going on a overseas training camp, never used an ice bath before. During this training camp, he had performed better than he'd ever performed and had automatically made the correlation that it was caused by the ice baths. So I'd come home, bought an ice bath, done everything, and well, why aren't these gains anymore? Am I doing the ice bath wrong? And I'm like, yeah, but let's break down this training camp. You weren't in work. You're away from the wife and kids. Your sleep was better. Your nutrition was better. The training was probably more structured. Mm-hmm. There's a million things that were making it better. The ice might have helped a bit, but it certainly wasn't the trigger for everything falling into place. But you just hadn't paused long enough to think about that stuff or chatted to anyone to think about those things. So again, that whole sort of thing I was mentioning about nobody sets out to do stupid stuff. They just get pushed down certain avenues with the best of intentions. So this guy had gone full on into, and this was pre the home-based ice bath stuff. This was a guy going to Tesco's every night, buying bags of ice and chucking them in his bath.
Oh, wow.
This was around the time Andy Murray was everywhere sitting in his ice baths and all of this stuff. So this had sort of echoed right across into marital problems. His missus was proper pissed off with him, spending so much of his evening tucked away in the bath, just sitting there in cold water, basically. And I'm trying to say to him, look, it's probably actually being that now it's part of the reason you're training suffering, because you've done it to the point that now we're having a negative effect.
Yeah.
Because the devil's in the dose for most of these things. So it is all of those little perfect storm scenarios, but it's everything else that just sits equally above it, and it'll affect different people different ways and influence their recovery and rest different ways.
Yeah. Well, before we start to wrap up, because I've got a question, haven't I, Faye? You know,
So I'm going to ask this on behalf of Nick.
Go on.
And it's about stretching. Specifically, I think Nick is referring to static stretching.
Well, kind of all of it, really.
All right, let's just generalize now. I did try to find out specifically, but let's just generalize. Stretching. Oh, I don't even know. I'm trying to think the best way to word this question. So when to do it? When is it? Should I do it? Sorry. Yes, that's Nick's question. And why should I do it or not do it?
Yeah, good question. And certainly up until maybe 5 years ago, would have had a very soapboxy, sweary, ranty answer from me about don't bother wasting your time ever. What a load of rubbish. And part of that was based on some of the evidence. We don't see strong evidence for it having any positive effect, particularly static stretching pre-runs or post-runs. We sometimes see that it can have a detrimental effect on your running. We know there's a slight delay in muscle activation. So you do lots of static stretching before running hard. Potentially it's going to have a negative effect on performance. Probably not an effect on injury. There's no real consequences injury-wise, but we're probably not going to... What we're doing to try and perform well might help us perform worse.
Because we need that stiffness, don't we?
Yes, we want stiffness and thing. And then also the common sense side of it of, unless you're a sprinter, most of us don't go anywhere near end range of movement. So why are we trying to gain those? We would be far better getting stronger in a mid-range, in the ranges of movement that the muscles work, than there. But kids changed a lot with me. Kids made me very philosophical and reflective and tried to see both sides of an argument and be less shouty about a lot of stuff. So kids came along and made me go, right, okay, why do I get, because I used to get a lot of pushback about it. I spoke at the National Running Show a couple of years running about stretching and was very like, don't waste time, blah, blah. And I mean, literally, I was waiting for the tomatoes to get thrown at me because I was challenging people's inner beliefs. They were that rigid on, I need to stretch, I must stretch. And I think there's a whole sort of, that first breed of runners that often still have an influence as coaches and veterans in a running club. We were brought up through the 70s, 80s, 90s that you can't run if you don't stretch. It has to be done. So there's that sort of traditional beliefs to challenge. But I think when I unwound everything and realized, why am I so angry about stretching? Ultimately, I fell back on similar theme to what we've chatted about recovery. I just thought people with limited time could be making better use of their time. So these people that spend 20 minutes a night stretching, they weren't doing any strength work. They weren't doing any recovery work. They weren't doing the stuff that they could be doing to be proactive. And my real rant was, just do something better instead. It's less important than you think it is. So I have mellowed. I don't prescribe stretching to anyone, athlete or coach athlete or patient under my care.
Ditto.
I don't say to anyone, go off and try and do something like that. If they ask me about it, I tend to fall somewhere in between now. Look, you're doing all the right stuff. This is my key thing with it. If you're doing everything else that matters, the things we've discussed already tonight, and you think stretching helps and you want to do it, feel free, fill your boots, do it as much as you want, but only because you've done everything else right. And under the caveat that there's probably not much scientifically that you're doing at tissue level to improve anything or prevent anything. But if you like it and it's a itch you want to scratch, fine. But if someone comes into me quite raw, quite open to sort of education and advice and says, stretching, Mike, should I stretch? I just go, don't bother. Better things you can do. And, I'd rather you pre-run, just go and do a more progressive warm-up and then just run harder when you run.
That is something that me and Nick often talk about, is making sure people do their warm-up and their cool-down. Because we've had this discussion where sometimes people will be short on time, so they'll skip their cool-down. So, rather than skip your cool-down, do that and feel better as a result of it.
The sort of the lunchtime runners where 5 days a week, I run sort of 45 to 50 minutes at my lunchtime. And because I've only got 45 to minutes, I run quite hard. So they're always stuck in that zone 2. And then they're picking up problems with performance or injury. And you'll say, well, why do you always run quite hard? Well, I've only got 45 minutes, so I do an easy 10 minutes. Then I do a 10-minute stretch. Then I have to cane it for 5K at the end. And I'm like, well, just lose the stretch and do an easier 10-minute run and then just run for a bit longer, slower. Oh, can I do that? Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. And you're probably going to feel better for it afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's not the devil that I once used to say it was. It's not something that I still would say, look, there's way better things to do because it doesn't do what you think it's going to do. But likewise, and again, sometimes it's this behavior hostage negotiation type discussion where I might want someone to really stop stretching and start doing some strength work or start changing the way they look at something else. But these beliefs are so sort of hardwired into them. I sort of go, I've got to pick my battle here. So maybe I'll let them stretch for the next few weeks we're working together because they want to. And then we'll gradually just bring the subject up and, well, what if we do this or this? So like I mentioned at the start, I'm going to send you something, have a little watch or a read of it, and we'll chat about it next time you're in. So I tend not to bash and look for conflict as much about stretching as I used to. But I'm certainly, and I will be vocal and say, if you want to do it, as long as you're doing everything else. But my main approach to trying to get people away from stretching now is to sort of ignore it. Just never bring it up. If someone asks me about it, I'll talk. If they mention it amongst other things, I tend to focus on the other things and just push it to one side a little bit. And again, then it's the sort of like, okay, well, look, probably general mobility / range of movement is better for you than stretching. So why aren't we thinking maybe about more yoga-y, Pilates-y type stuff? That might be a bit more fun and a bit more beneficial. Likewise, if someone comes to me and it's like, oh, I've got a hamstring problem and I think it's a stretching issue. Well, why don't we do something like a deadlift where we're actually strengthening through range, but we're lengthening under tension as well? That's going to be a little bit more beneficial. I think as well then, from an education point of view, there's the societal runner education around understanding their bodies. So you'll see tons of athletes who'll say something like, the reason I'm getting injured or the reason I can't perform is because I got really tight calves. And I'll see them and I'll assess their muscle length, and their length's fine. There's nothing wrong with their calves. But you do a strength test and they've got like awful levels of strength conditioning. And you'll say to them, look, your muscle, I genuinely believe you that you feel tight. I'm not questioning that you don't feel tight, but you're not tight. What you are is weak and stiff.
Yeah.
So actually, that's why when you're asking me, is there a better stretch to do, or should I be stretching this a different way? My answer is no, it's not the stretch that's the problem. It's you doing the wrong thing for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And again, they're not physiologists. I don't expect them to know what's tight, what's weak, what's stiff or whatever, but you can show them that and you can say, so potentially, how about you've come to me because you're saying stretching's not working and you've said you don't do any strength. How about we swap it for a couple of weeks and see how we feel? So I'm a little bit more crafty and mellow in the way I try to get people away from stretching. But ultimately at the same time would I just, but a sprinter comes to see me. And the reason that they're strong, they're training well, but the reason that maybe they're struggling at their start phase is because they lack a bit of hamstring mobility to get into certain ranges or hip flexor. Fine, maybe we'll do some stretching work in the short term for that, if that's what's identified. But there's certainly no blanket canvas stretch advice from me anywhere.
Brilliant. So that basically gives me permission to keep not stretching.
Not stretching. Absolutely.
It was from that talk that you did in Chippenham, I made the decision not to stretch anymore because I really like, and that's what I sort of going right back to the beginning of the episode. I said some of the things I really like that you said, and okay, kind of give me the pink slip to not have to stretch, but just the way you kind of put it of there isn't a huge amount of evidence that supports stretching. And actually, that tightness that you do feel in your calves, which I get, almost every time I take on a relatively new runner, oh, my calves are tight because you haven't been doing strength work, which you are now doing with me, because I pretty much don't coach anybody who doesn't do strength work, because I know, they're going to mitigate those feelings of tightness, as you put it, and but they're also going to get that mobility work through the range of motion under tension. It isn't just about getting strong. It is actually about, potentiating the body for, the running that we're going to do. And yeah, but having said that, there was one line you said was that, having said that, if somebody likes stretching and they're doing all the stuff that we want them to do and they want to go and stretch because they think it feels nice, then you crack on and do that.
Yeah, I don't think we can be that fascist to say just never do anything ever again, or in particular. It's just, let's just be honest and realistic about it, because it probably means you get buy-in on another thing that you want them to be better at.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's small-minded in anything these days to be that black and white. And in our world, obviously, there's things around the world we should be black and white on, but certainly in our world, it's like there's probably nothing in it that in running that these days, as a nearly 50-year-old bloke, I should be that fascist about. So I've mellowed a little bit, but I probably was ranty and chipping him. I probably was turning the corner about then. I might have been a bit rantier than I was tonight.
Yeah, no, I do remember speaking to my coach at the time. I won't say any names, but I said, well, I'm not going to stretch anymore. And she wasn't very happy about it.
Yeah.
But there we go. Mike, it's been awesome having you on. Faye, have you got any final questions?
I haven't, no. I think we've covered some fantastic stuff tonight. So thank you, Mike.
Yeah, we could have gone down an even bigger rabbit hole and tore that apart and do multiple episodes. But I think ultimately, in summary, just kind of taking away from this, where people can go away and put things into action, I think we can safely say, have a look at your sleep. Are you sleeping okay? Not what your watch tells you, but ask yourself, are you sleeping well? And if you can honestly say, probably not, then maybe that's an area you should work on. Are you eating well? And are you actually thinking of recovery as part of your training? And if you can't say yes to all of those three things, then put the massage gun back in the drawer. Thank you, Mike. It's been amazing.
My pleasure.
Before you go, where can people find you?
Very boringly, it's the Endurance Physio on most social media platforms. So that's the easiest place to find me and get in and connect with me and get in touch if there's any questions about anything.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, you put amazing content on your Instagram and just lots of really great, valuable, and some of the most valuable things you do. Actually, you seem to have a way of putting things in one line, and it's like, love that. So
when you say the same shit enough times, you get better at saying the same shit. It's that simple sometimes, isn't it? Said it wrong enough times, but you refine your message. So
yeah.
I think Twitter character count was my secret weapon. Right, I can't say it the way I'm a bit of a wordy wordsmith. I can't say it that way anymore.
Yeah,
this was a better way to say this.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mike. The Endurance Physio on all social media platforms. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
And that's another lap done on the Maximum Mileage Running podcast. Thank you for joining me and my athletes and my guests on this wild ride through the world of ultra, road and trail running. And remember, whether it's a mountain trail or the local road, every mile you conquer makes you stronger. Keep pushing, keep laughing, and of course, keep swearing when that hill just seems a little too steep. If you enjoyed today's journey, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a nice review. Your feedback does help me go that extra mile. Until next time, this is your host, Nick Hancock, reminding you to make every mile count. Run long, run strong, and run with maximum mileage. Catch you on the next run.